June 6, 1944. The world remembers it as the day of liberation. But for one group of men, it was the day of doom. Hidden in concrete bunkers, crouched behind sandbags and perched along the cliffs of Normandy, the German MG42 machine gunners awaited the Allied invasion. Armed with a weapon so deadly it was nicknamed Hitler's Buzzsaw, each gunner could unleash over 1,200 rounds per minute, shredding through men, metal, and even morale. But here's the dark truth. Their job was a death sentence, because once they opened fire on the beaches, they signed their own execution orders. The Allies knew exactly who the most dangerous men on those beaches were, and they made sure very few lived to tell the tale. The fate of the MG42 crews was cursed, pinned in their bunkers, hunted relentlessly by naval bombardments, strafing aircraft, flamethrowers, grenades, and desperate infantry charges. For many, survival was never even a possibility. Some estimates suggest over 90% of MG42 gunners never made it off the beaches alive. So why were these men trapped in this impossible role? What exactly happened to them once the Allies stormed ashore? And how did the very weapon that made them feared also seal their doom? This is the forgotten, horrific story of the MG42 gunners on D-Day. By 1944, the German Wehrmacht knew the Allies would invade France. The Atlantic Wall, Hitler's massive coastal defense system, stretched from Norway to Spain. But everyone knew the true storm would come to Normandy. Inside this wall of concrete and steel, German doctrine placed its most fearsome defenders, the MG42 crews. The MG42 was not just a machine gun. It was a nightmare. Its blistering fire rate, almost double that of the American Browning, gave the illusion of a continuous tearing scream, earning it the nickname Hitler's Buzzsaw. Just a single well-placed crew could pin down hundreds of men, mowing through advancing infantry before they ever reached the sand dunes. But there was a cost. The MG42 gunners were often young, inexperienced soldiers pressed into service. Many were barely in their 20s, their hands trembling as they fed the smoking barrels with ammunition belts. They were trained to fight until death, stationed in reinforced bunkers with little chance of escape. The Allies knew this. Intelligence briefings identified machine gun nests as the greatest threat to the landings. Naval gunners memorized their coordinates. Bombers flew sorties to level their positions. Infantry squads were trained to bypass everything else and take out the machine gunners first. For the men inside those bunkers, the odds were horrifying. They could hold off an assault for minutes, sometimes hours, but sooner or later, the tide would turn. And when it did, the retribution came swiftly and mercilessly. Even before the first landing craft reached Omaha or Utah Beach, the MG42 crews had already been marked for death. As the first waves of Allied troops approached, the MG42s erupted. Their roar echoed across the beaches. Entire squads fell within seconds, torn apart by invisible streams of lead. Survivors threw themselves to the sand, paralyzed by fear. From their vantage points, the gunners saw a scene of chaos, boats burning, men drowning under the weight of their packs, medics collapsing beside the wounded they tried to save. For a moment, it seemed as if the MG42s could stop the invasion entirely. But firing that cursed weapon was like lighting a beacon. Every muzzle flash betrayed their position. Every second they fired, the Allies closed in, artillery zeroed in. Naval destroyers fired salvo after salvo into the cliffs. The ground shook so violently inside the bunkers that crews went deaf, their eardrums bursting as concrete cracked above them. If the shells didn't get them, the flamethrowers did. Allied engineers advanced bunker by bunker, pumping fire into every firing slit. Machine gunners screamed as flames consumed them, their weapons glowing red-hot before falling silent. And when infantry finally broke through, the gunners rarely received mercy. Soldiers, furious over the slaughter on the beach, treated them with special vengeance. Accounts describe grenades tossed into bunkers without hesitation, or rifle fire pouring into dark openings long after the MG42s had gone quiet. For those who surrendered, survival was hardly guaranteed. Many were executed on the spot, seen as murderers, not soldiers. The psychological toll on both sides was unimaginable. The gunners knew they were trapped. Their orders were to fight to the last man, but every trigger pull only sealed their fate. For hours, the slaughter went both ways. But eventually, almost every MG42 crew was silenced, one way or another. And yet, as horrifying as this was, what came next was even worse. By midday on June 6th, the beaches were littered with wreckage and corpses. The MG42s had done their work, exacting a horrific toll on the Allies. But the price for the gunners was catastrophic. On Omaha Beach alone, nearly every machine gun nest was destroyed or overrun. Survivors recalled stumbling through smoke-choked bunkers filled with burned, shattered remains of the men who had once wielded Hitler's buzzsaw. Those who lived long enough to surrender often faced a cruel fate. Captured MG42 gunners were considered the most hated of all German defenders. Allied soldiers, enraged by the sight of their fallen comrades, sometimes refused to take them prisoner at all. It was one of the deadliest jobs of the war. The MG42 had the power to kill hundreds in minutes, but it also cursed its operators with one of the shortest life expectancies on the battlefield. By the end of D-Day, the average MG42 crew's chance of survival was almost zero. The irony was inescapable. The weapon that gave them power also guaranteed their destruction. When the smoke cleared over Normandy, the Allied dead numbered in the thousands. But the MG42 crews, the men once feared as the greatest threat on the beaches, had almost entirely vanished. Their bunkers lay in ruins, their weapons silent, their existence erased in a single day of chaos. The survivors of D-Day rarely spoke of them. To the Allies, they were not soldiers but executioners. To the Germans, they were forgotten, casualties of a war machine that demanded the impossible and offered no way out. But history forces us to ask, were these men truly villains, or simply young soldiers caught in a role that doomed them from the start? Their story is a reminder that in war, even the most powerful weapons carry a curse. The MG42 could cut down hundreds, but for the crews trapped behind its barrels, it only offered terror, torment, and death. And so, the question lingers on the blood-soaked sands of Normandy, who truly had the deadliest job of all, the soldiers storming the beaches, or the cursed men behind the MG42?